This has Red Sox fans split. In the opening days of the offseason, Alex Bregman, the veteran all-star third baseman, has walked out the door and opted out of his contract. I'm here to break down the newest updates surrounding Bregman and the Red Sox and how new reports suggest that Pete Alonso could be the answer for Bregman's departure. We'll break down all of that on this episode of Red Sox Digest, but be sure to scroll down and click that subscribe button, as every day this offseason is going to be chaotic, and this is the number one place to stay up to date with Boston Red Sox news and information. We do appreciate the love and support, but now let's get to it and break down. Is this the new chapter without Bregman? Now, the Red Sox just last offseason, if you guys aren't aware, to give some context, Alex Bregman was the star free agent last offseason. The Detroit Tigers, the Kansas City Royals, the Houston Astros, and the Boston Red Sox were all in this big game of chicken for Alex Bregman. They went through the offseason, and finally the Boston Red Sox presented a $40 million annual contract to Alex Bregman. Here's the thing. There was a lot of deferred money. There was a few opt-outs, including one following the first season in Boston, which is now going into effect because Alex Bregman officially, just a few days ago, which we broke down on this channel when it happened, opted out of that contract, which means he is no longer on that contract involved with the Red Sox organization. He is then going to test the free agency market. He has Scott Boras as his client, or he has Scott Boras as his agent. He is Scott Boras' client. And, well, if you don't know anything about Scott Boras, he's known as the number one agent in the game. He gets contracts that are just generational wealth times 1,000. It is ridiculous, the type of contracts and how well he does, not only for his client, but as well as for himself. It's impressive. And obviously Alex Bregman being a part of that, I feel like it's a bit of leverage in the sense that if Bregman says, hey, I'm going to the market, I don't want to, or not that I don't want to be in Boston, but I'm at least going to see what everyone else is going to offer me, and if I can get really paid here and I can get that long contract, that 6 to 8 year mark that I'm really looking for, that Breslow may not be willing to give Alex Bregman because it may cost near $180 million to get up near that $30 million AAV, or that annual value, to keep Bregman in comparison to teams like the Tigers, as well as the Royals and others that are going to now be in on Alex Bregman. Now, Jim Bowden gave us a series of different comments and quotes that we have to highlight surrounding Alex Bregman. The first one coming from this article published yesterday, where he goes on to say the Red Sox loved their time with Alex Bregman and appreciated all he did on and off the field. That said, I'm not sure they'll be willing to commit to Bregman on a long-term contract at his market price if they don't expect them to let rookie Marcelo Meyer take over at third base with Trevor Story staying at shortstop. Now, if this is the option, and when I say the option, I mean the only option for the Red Sox, I would understand if it happened. This is not the only option. They could go out there and they could reacquire Alex Bregman if they paid him in the sense of giving him that longer contract, not in the sense of more money, but just because he was getting $40 million a year. It might not break down that way on this graphic, but it only breaks down to 25. But the deferred money that he's getting, it broke down to $40 million a year. If you look at the top 3 years, $120 million, every bit of $40 million annually. Bregman was getting paid very, very well AAV-wise, but the whole point of this in opting out is he wants to be taken care of until he basically is going to retire and ride out into the sunset. Whether or not Boston is going to give him that long contract, we are going to have to wait and find out. But again, Jim Bowden would then go on the Foul Territory podcast, and he would go on to double down on the idea of the same notion that you get when reading this comment from this article, again, written by Jim Bowden, one of the best insiders surrounding the game of baseball. It feels like there's some disconnect there between Bregman and the Red Sox. It feels like that the front office, it just isn't willing to go out there and do that, and things just, it is not as much confidence behind the idea that Bregman's going to be back. It's not as something that you should be as hopeful for in, I guess you should say, because the last few weeks, we knew this was coming in the sense of Bregman opting out. But in all those conversations, everyone, whether it was me, Sean, or Jace on this channel, were fairly optimistic and confident in that Bregman was going to return to Boston. Up to this point, through the first few days of the offseason, it is not looking that way. Now, again, back to Jim Bowden's second quote. As he goes on to say on the Foul Territory podcast, I wouldn't be surprised if starting pitching and first base ended up being the biggest two moves Craig Breslow makes. And that's the end of the quote. Then goes on to say, Jim Bowden doesn't get the sense that re-signing Alex Bregman is the Red Sox number one priority. Now, if you look at the stats and the underlying metrics for Bregman from this past year he had, it's the polar opposite of exactly what you're going to see from basically every other Red Sox player outside of Roman Anthony. It's very, very, very swing and miss for everyone else. It's a lot of swing and miss. It's a lot of chasing. It's a lot of whiffing. It's a lot of strikeouts. With Alex Bregman, you didn't get a lot of that. In the top percentiles across the board in all of those categories correlating in one another, walk percentage just below those. But then if you look at the actual offensive production, just above league average and expected WOBA, basically league average and expected batting average, expected slugging, average exit velocity, lower percentiles in things like bat speed as well as barrel percentage. Not the greatest season offensively, especially statistically when you look at the underlying metrics for someone of Alex Bregman that was so impactful on and off the field this season without a doubt. And you have heard me say this ad nauseum. Bregman's ability to lead and coach while being a player on the same team is unmeasurable. It really is. Going into those hotels at 3 o'clock in the morning and meeting with Narvi and Connor Wong and the pitching staff and allowing them to game plan something and go into the next game and execute at a high level was just rinse and repeat time and time again in all these big moments for the Red Sox, which is something that can't go understated. But when it comes down to the offensive production for Alex Bregman, it's just a bit interesting. I don't know if he did enough on the field wise, and again, health was a concern this past year, that make Craig Breslow bite or double down and bite down the mouth guard and go back out there and really bring back Bregman for double the amount of length that you originally signed him for, getting close to that 6 to 8 year mark, which was what Bregman's hoping for and why he opted out. Now, we do have another quote from Jon Heyman about Alex Bregman, the situation where he would go on to say, quote, "To me, the Red Sox are the team for Bregman." And that's the end of the quote, which is interesting because there's a lot of teams that are definitely in the race for Bregman up to this point. The New York Yankees obviously went and got Ryan McMahon last year. They have Jazz, a bunch of utility guys. They need a third baseman. Unfortunately, I would hate to see him in New York. I don't want him in New York, but that is a legit chance. As well as Kansas City, they were in the bidding last year with obviously Bobby Witt and Salvi Perez. They need a third baseman there. Miguel Garcia was phenomenal all year long, but they were using him more of a platoon option. If they could go out there and sign Bregman, and which it seems like they are very much going to attempt to do, they're another respectable option. And finally, I'm not even going to mention the Astros. I did earlier, but I think it's all wishy-wash with them. The last real competitor in my eyes is going to be the Detroit Tigers. They were the number one competitor to the Red Sox last offseason. A.J. Hinch is there, long connection with Bregman, and that team needs a little bit of Alex Bregman in their life. I don't know how well he'll do in that park playing at home in Detroit, but in the sense of leadership with a younger core and just being the boost they are hoping for, he could fit in Detroit. I obviously would love to see him back in Boston. If you look at the Spotrac as well as Jim Bowden's overall contract expectations or predictions, 6 years, $182 million, the best fits for Bregman: Red Sox, Tigers, Yankees, Phillies, Dodgers, Cubs, Mariners, Mets, all high market, big market teams that are going to have the money to go out there and spend on Alex Bregman. It just comes down to who offers him the longevity of the contract. And then finally, the Spotrac, $27.7 million. So based off of the Spotrac predictions and really market value in comparison to the other numbers that we are seeing, it seems like a bit of an overpay. Spotrac has him valued at 27.5, 4 years, $110 million. He's going to get closer to 6, 7, 8 years to closer to $170 to $180 million. It looks like it's just a matter of time until we find out who's willing to give Bregman that long-term deal. And if no one is, maybe it turns into another big game of chicken amongst a bunch of different organizations in the bidding for Alex Bregman. Now, to the original quote that we brought up, is first base going to be the replacement to Alex Bregman? Now, that doesn't make any sense because Bregman doesn't play first base. He didn't log a single rep at first base for the Red Sox. I don't know if he has his entire career. He's played second. He's played a little bit of short. He's played third. He's not going to play first. So going out and getting a first baseman is not going to replace the void at third unless they are solely okay with giving the keys to Marcelo Meyer, or possibly trading for Nolan Arenado. We broke that down in the last episode of Red Sox Digest. And that is just crazy in itself. I don't like the idea, but again, it is what it is. First base, Pete Alonso. Now, this is an enticing conversation. Pete Alonso is exactly the kind of player the Red Sox need, says Tim Healy. Quote, adding another 9-figure contract is maybe a big ask for the Red Sox in recent years, but I think they can swing it. And that's the end of the quote from Tim, again, on the Foul Territory podcast. And he would go on to elaborate a bit more about how Pete Alonso would fit in Boston. They need a power bat. They were talking about Kyle Schwarber. They were talking about Murakami. Pete Alonso fills that checkbox. Fills that box with a check mark. He is a power threat, obviously. If you look at this underlying metrics on Baseball Savant, the polar opposite of Alex Bregman, if you'd like to notice. Chase percentage, whiff percentage, K percentage based on ball percentage, all below league average, so he'd fit in greatly with the Boston Red Sox of this past year, unfortunately. But that's just the way it would go. And the defense, based off the underlying metrics, are subpar. He's usually number 1 or 2 in WAR for first baseman with year after year, despite it being very hard to collect WAR at first base as a first baseman. Underlying metrics don't do him a whole lot, but again, the Red Sox played horrible defense last year. What says they're going to change anything? We need them to. That's the reason they got bounced from the wild card early, had a .68 whip, still was able to lose that game. There's no way that's going to be able to work out. Errors, bad defense is not going to help this team. Power bat could help this team. Now, here's the difference between Alonso and Schwarber. Alonso will actually play first base. He will actually give you defensive reps, and that's the biggest trade-off. We know how Craig Breslow feels with his model, and paying someone who is only going to swing the bat crazy amounts of money like Kyle Schwarber is going to demand this offseason. Pete Alonso is going to play first base. Granted, the underlying metrics aren't great, but he does play first base, and it could help you depending on whether or not the Red Sox are going to take another chance on a young man in Tristan Casas. Again, the underlying metrics for Alonso are great. This past year, he was being paid $30 million on $27 million annually for that 1 year, with a second year coming up, which would have paid $24 million. Again, he had an opt-out just like Bregman after that 1 year deal. He used it. He exercised it. He is now a free agent, and it seems like the Red Sox could be one of the odds-on favorites to go out and acquire someone like Pete Alonso. It's going to be interesting. I'm not the biggest fan of Pete Alonso. I'm going to be honest with you. There's a lot of really good options this offseason, and I feel like Pete Alonso is a good fallback option. Go for guys like Alex Bregman. Go for guys like Kyle Schwarber. Go for guys like Kyle Tucker if you can. And then go from there. Then Pete Alonso is still on the table, go out and try to acquire him. Remember, you don't have to go get the all-star big-name players. We just watched the Toronto Blue Jays, led by Ernie Clement and Dalton Varsho, get to the World Series. Yes, they fell short, but they went 7 games. You do not need 16 all-stars. You have great players on this Red Sox team. If you can add an all-star, that's great, but you also want to have the ability to go out there and acquire that starting pitching market, which we've discussed ad nauseum, and I ask you guys to go watch any of the more recent Red Sox videos, because we post all about the pitching and the conversations that are going on, because that has been the biggest topic of conversation surrounding the Red Sox. Let me know down below, how do you feel about Alex Bregman? Would you rather him come back? How do you feel about Pete Alonso? There's a lot of the Red Sox Nation is very split on both of these names. Let me know down below your overall thoughts and opinions on both of them, and I will see you on the next episode of Red Sox Digest.